So those medical records had a lot of direct quotes in them, didn't they?
Medical.
The Johns Hopkins records? Well, they were trying to say what you were saying?
No, I mentioned that before. Yes.
And they kept bringing out what would be considered sort of negative information, right?
Object to the leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yes, and like I stated, there was several things missing, such as lesions or dystonia, things like that.
Well, right. These were the same people who stopped documenting symptoms after a certain period of time. Is that right?
Objection, leading, and argumentative.
Sustained on that one.
What, if anything, did they do about those lesions and other symptoms after about, I don't know, October 13th or 14th?
They went from lesions to self-inflicting wounds.
So these same people have got all kinds of direct quotes, right? Isn't that true? And they've got a lot of assertions about where you did, what you did, right?
Objection, leading, and argumentative.
Right now, it's just a statement. I haven't heard a question, but it does sound a lot like leading.
Right. Well, let me ask you something, Jack. Through all of the records that you have seen back from TGH and back from Lurie's and back from the other doctors, did any of them put up a system of direct quotes and denials and you said this is and they believe that?
Objection, leading, vague, and argumentative.
Did?
Yeah, I didn't understand the question, so I'm going to sustain on vagueness.
Was this the first time somebody had put into the medical records all of these types of allegations consistently against you?
Objection, again, vague, argumentative.
That one's overruled. You can answer that.
That all the hospitals did the same as
No,
what they did?
I'm asking you whether this was the first time, whether Johns Hopkins did. Was this the first hospital that had ever put all this kind of stuff into your record?
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff in there.
So from this perspective, were you relying on them to be the treating physicians at this point? Is that right? Johns Hopkins was supposed to be treating your daughter.
Yes.
They were not supposed to be prosecuting your family, were they?
Objection, move to strike.
I'm going to overrule that question.
I'm sorry, say it again.
They were not supposed to be trying to prosecute your family.
Absolutely not, no.
All of this stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, all of these things they put in there were after they had taken the position with the outside world that Maya was making it up and Beata was essentially a criminal.
Objection.
Is that right?
Argumentative, misstates the evidence.
Sustained.
Wasn't this all after allegations of Munchausen by proxy and conversion disorder had been raised?
Same objection.
Overruled on that.
Yes.
So when you go through all of those records and compare them to the last hospital records, do you come away with the feeling that they were actually trying to help you or build a case against you?
Objection, leading.
Alternative. I didn't hear you ruling.
Sustained.
What, if anything, did it appear Johns Hopkins was trying to do in those records to you?
Objection, again, argumentative, misstates the evidence, and lack of foundation calls for a legal.
I'm overruling that one.
My feeling, they were painting a picture that we're doing something wrong.
And they were supposed to be your daughter's doctors?
Yes.
How many times in your life had you had doctors put all of these things in your records just randomly?
Objection, vague, and argumentative. That's all these things.
Sustained.
How many times prior to Johns Hopkins had any doctors consistently put negative after negative after negative, you said this, you said that, comments in your record?
Objection, same objection.
Okay. Well, you can answer it this last time, but Mr. Anderson, you need to move on.
I'm about
You
to.
have more than amply made your point.
I understand.
So go ahead and answer it, and then we need to move on.
That's the first time.
So Was Johns Hopkins, to your view, trying to get your daughter well and get you out of there?
Calls for speculation, objection.
From his perspective.
You haven't finished the question, but it also sounded like it was going to be a compound question, so let's try to rephrase the question.
Did Johns Hopkins ever come to you at any point after they first told you on the 9th that you couldn't leave and tell you, it's okay now, you can leave?
That we could leave? No.
No, that you could leave.
Was there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. No.
And so were you operating under the assumption throughout this period of time that if you took your daughter, stepped out the door to get out of there, you would be either by security to the police or to the police end up in, well, custody?
Objection to the leading, Your Honor.
Overruled on that one.
That's what we were worried about.
I want to talk for a moment about any statements to this Detective Graham. Let's take the jury to what happened there. So, what's the first time you saw this detective?
I went to visit Maya for a visitation at the hospital. That was through Kathy Beatty at the time. I had to go through the hospital social worker for visitation. When I arrived, I went upstairs to get Maya, and she wanted to go down to the cafeteria to get a piece of cake or mashed potatoes. I don't recall what she wanted, but the door opened, and Kathy Beatty was there with a Sarasota County Sheriff's investigator, female.
Now, before this time, had you had any conversations with or involvement with the police over this?
With Graham, no.
So somebody called Graham to get her over there, from the best of your knowledge?
I'm sure it was coordinated because they knew exactly where I was.
And Ms. Beatty directed her up there, is that true?
They met us at the elevator doors downstairs.
All right. So you're there to see your daughter.
Yes.
Tell the jury what happened after that.
So they wanted to speak with me, and I advised them I was just going to feed Maya. So they allowed me to go have lunch with Maya. Then I brought Maya back upstairs, and I informed her I'll be back in a little bit. Well, it was a long time. Detective Graham brought me inside a room. And
Hang on. When she brought you inside the room, was she armed, to the best of your knowledge?
I don't recall seeing a gun.
Did it turn out later she was?
I don't.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Sustained.
And so, did you know you were being recorded?
No, not at all.
She did not explain that to you?
No, she at one point she said she had to look out the window and pay her parking meter or something, and she reached in her purse. So obviously, maybe just changing the tape or whatever.
In her questioning, did she seem like she wanted you to testify against your wife?
Oh, yes, it was like a big wedge.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You ever heard of flipping a witness
Yes,
Objection, speculation.
or a suspect?
Overruled.
You ever
Yes.
heard of? And so her questioning in there, did she or did she not warn you before any of this questioning that if you weren't going to cooperate, if you weren't going to help, that you were going to spend time in jail?
Objection.
That's on the tape.
Leading and speculative.
Well, I'm going to sustain the leading. Overrule on speculation.
What did she tell you about what was going to happen if you didn't turn on your wife?
she stated that she put other people in jail for many, many years and basically do the same thing to me.
So what was your choice here?
Cooperate.
And what happens if you didn't cooperate?
Object, speculation.
Overruled.
That I didn't know. That was scary.
Well, had she already told you she was going to?
Yes, yeah, that was burnt into me right away.
Well, then your choices were what? To either testify against your wife or, from your perspective, go to jail?
Objection, argumentative, speculative.
And
Overruled.
you can answer.
Yes.
And so throughout this process, did she suggest, as we've heard, the answers to the questions in the question? You know what leading questions are, you've heard that here.
Yes.
In all of these things, did she suggest how you should answer in the question?
Yes. And then there was times where, just she had so much from the other side about all these high dosages and this drug is so dangerous. And, how dare, I don't know the exact words, so don't quote me on them, but it's basically how dare you for even doing what you did by going to Mexico, things like that.
Wait. She came in loaded with information from Johns Hopkins?
Yes.
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Where, if any, if you're aware, I'll rephrase, where, to the best of your knowledge, would she get all of this information about your medical history?
Objection speculation.
He knows.
Do you know?
I would assume that it came from the hospital.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
All right. Was there anyone else other than the hospital at that point who had all of that information?
No.
Logically, who was the only entity or person who could supply that information to the detective?
Objection again, lack of foundation, speculation.
That's the predicate. It was a predicate. Never mind. So, what did you think you had to do there in order to see Maya again?
I had to cooperate.
If you wanted to take your daughter home, what did you have to do?
Oh, this was something that was discussed with the attorneys. Like I stated earlier, I had an attorney. I don't know if it was at that time. I had an attorney, Beata had an attorney, and the children had an attorney.
So she questioned you without counsel. Were your attorney there when she was questioning you?
No.
Objection again to the leading.
Was you? So, can you tell the jury whether you were questioned without an attorney?
I was questioned without an attorney.
Did you have any help then, in case she said inappropriate things, to
No.
call her out on it?
No, not at all.
And so did she imply to you that if you weren't going to say yes to a lot of things, that you were going to have a great deal of problems down the road?
Yes.
And is that why you said the things you said?
I did, but then I defended myself on a lot of them. At the end, where she didn't record as well, going down the hallway, I said my wife would never do something like that.
So you told her that.
I did.
Didn't you tell her that on multiple occasions in
Yes.
that recording?
Yes.
And what did she do once you said that? Did she
Go to the next.
But wait, once you said that, did she relent and stop asking you leading questions, or did she continue trying to press you into saying negative things about
Just
your wife?
kept
Objection to leading the argument.
That's alternative.
I'm going to sustain the leading on that one.
Did she tell the jury what, if anything, she did in terms of accepting the fact that you had told her repeatedly that Beata would never do this?
that. She just repeated the question again and again type thing.
On certain occasions, did she repeat the question on multiple times?
I don't know how many times or whatever, but some were, yes.
At the hospital, during the first part of the time you were there, when Sally Smith walked in, as you've testified, in a white lab coat, were you relying on Johns Hopkins in terms of not letting people wander around their hospital with a lab coat on?
An objection to the leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
What, if anything, did you rely on the hospital for in terms of keeping people with a white lab coat and the emblem on it out of your daughter's room?
Objection to the relevance.
Overruled.
What did I rely on?
No.
I'm sorry.
Did you rely on the hospital in that regard to keep people out?
Oh, yes.
And so did you start to discuss things with Dr. Smith thinking that she was another doctor there?
I didn't even know her name at that time. She never introduced herself. She just came in and just started asking questions. So, yes, I thought she was a doctor for Johns Hopkins because she came in alone. She was the only one in the room with Maya and I.
So no one introduced her?
No,
Did any hospital person correct that misassumption?
no,
And did you learn later that she was, in fact, closely aligned with the hospital?
She actually mischaracterizes the evidence and
Or overruled on that one.
that she was in with the hospital? Yes.
So now, in this case, and you've been following it. Excuse me. Sorry, how many times have you been deposed in this case?
5 times.
How many times has Maya been deposed?
5 times. Kyle won, I believe.
And also, and you have stayed in touch with who are deposing and who are not deposing. You followed the case, in other words.
Yes.
And have you heard whether any psychologist or psychiatrist prior to Johns Hopkins on October 7th ever diagnosed Maya with some type of fictitious disorder?
No.
Prior to October 7th, did any psychiatrist or psychologist diagnose a Munchausen by proxy situation?
I never heard of that. No.
From your knowledge of CRPS, how unusual is it to have people at first question and consider these types of diagnosis, conversion disorder?
I wasn't really educated on that, but a lot of them are diagnosed with that, fictitious or conversion at first because they didn't get properly diagnosed with CRPS. But in Maya's instance, she was diagnosed with CRPS, after Tampa General.
You've been asked on several occasions whether during certain times, particularly, I think October 11th, on October 11th, then, how many days was it until the state actually entered an order to take your daughter? Was it on the 14th?
The 13th, I was told to leave.
So by October 11th, you were pretty much through with your week there?
Yes.
And so when Beata started to, well, let me put it this way. Was your wife shy about stating her opinion to the Johns Hopkins doctors?
No.
And were you concerned that if Beata continued to press them, they would keep Maya longer?
My personal feeling, yes.
And so, in terms of approach, did you try to present a more relaxed and not quite as intense approach than your wife?
Yes.
Now, by was it your impression, based on everything that happened to you, that the reason for your losing your daughter was because of the use of ketamine? Losing your daughter to the state was because of the use of ketamine?
Yes.
So after you got her back, tell the jury just how interested you were in trying ketamine anymore.
Well, I was instructed not to, but we've seen great results with it. And
So continue.
there's times, we wish we were able to get her treated. And now I'm seeing her, getting a little downhill here. So I'm very concerned.
But have you remained concerned that if it gets out to another doctor that maybe doesn't know you as well, that something might happen?
Sure. Absolutely.
And from your knowledge, and how old are you now?
62.
I'm sorry to ask
but
you
I
that.
feel like 80 after today.
But has it been your experience that once something gets into your medical records, it tends to stay in your
It's
medical
stuck
records?
there.
And throughout this period of time, then, did it appear to you that Johns Hopkins had prejudged you?
Objection
and your wife?
calls for a legal conclusion
Prejudged.
and speculation.
I can rephrase.
Yeah, prejudge, I don't understand that.
Got it.
Sustained.
Well, in reviewing the records to Tampa General, did you read where Johns Hopkins had sent over a, if you will, transfer report?
Did Tampa General send one over?
No, did Johns Hopkins send one over to Tampa General to start this out?
We went from Lurie's to Tampa General.
I got it.
Okay.
But do you know if,
That I would be unaware of. That would have been Beata.
fair enough. All right, so Maya tried quite a number of her old activities as she got a little better.
Yes.
Did they last?
Some.
And why didn't they last?
It was too much pain.
And what happens, what about memories of her mom? Strike it. Who introduced her to these various activities?
Well, Mom, Beata, and Kyle, they did ice skating. At first it was the two kids, and Mom was sitting on a cold bench in the ice rink. So she decided to start ice skating. Then that was up in Chicago area. And then she did the same thing here. Instead of sitting there, she then, while she was doing her treatments, different patients in different locations, if she went by Ellington, she would take her lunch and skate.
Well, from what you saw, did Maya have a difficult time doing activities that she used to share with her mom?
It brings back a lot of memories, yes.
And were you pleased he was at least trying to do these things?
Yes. Oh, yes.
But was it typical that when she tried an event, a sport, a hobby that had been introduced to her and supported by her mom, it didn't last very long?
Yeah, and I see that with the piano as well right now, too.
Is she playing piano much anymore?
Not much.
She play a lot before your wife died?
It was every day, and in fact, she did it in the hospital as well. She enjoyed it at that time.
So she doesn't do that anymore?
Not much.
She tried ice skating. Does she do that anymore?
No.
Of course, never got back into gymnastics.
No, and her workouts are very limited right now.
So many of the activities that she used to enjoy, can you tell the jury whether they're now no longer there or limited?
Object to the leading,
Overrule that objection.
A lot of them are gone.
Are you aware that she quit Cracker Barrel?
She did, yes.
Are you aware she quit Cracker Barrel after a matter of a couple weeks?
Yes, she had a dizzy spell, several dizzy spells there. And like I stated, she didn't carry the food there. She had one of the people that clean up or somebody from the kitchen carry the food.
All right. Now let me ask you about a note that was put in front of you with Beata's handwriting that said IV ketamine, desperate.
Yes.
Can you tell the jury how the IV ketamine was administered? Was it administered through the arm or was it mixed with something?
Yeah, this is a little confusing. Originally, after the treatments, she would get some take-home, I don't want to say take-home ketamine. She had pre-filled syringes without a needle, and it was given orally. And these were made up at King's Pharmacy in Palm Harbor, Florida. So after her treatments at Dr. Hannah's, we would have to go pick up that prescription, and these were for to give at home. It was difficult after a treatment to go to King's Pharmacy and pick it up because you have the child in the car and she just got out of the treatment, so she's tired in that. But we did that.
Well,
And
how did you administer it? Did you mix it with something?
that one was mixed. I don't know if there was a flavoring in it at that time. But then she also had ketamine ointment for her lesions, to rub on the lesions. And then after time, the cost of those pre-filled ketamines for the oral, I believe they were pretty expensive. So at one point, they went from that to ketamine IV. It was a vial, and then you pulled the ketamine out of there, mixed it with Gatorade, and then gave it by mouth, oral. But it was confusing because now you got a IV prescription for ketamine. And that would last a while, I believe, because it was bigger or something like that.
Will you please tell the jury whether you ever saw, heard, smelled, tasted anything in any way, heard from Maya, anywhere else, that Beata was giving Maya IV ketamine as an IV at home?
No.
And when Maya came in that first day, do you dispute many of the things that they put in those records?
Objection, vague.
I'm about to.
Sustained.
Do you dispute the inference from what they're saying that Maya was thrashing around needlessly? Was there purpose behind that?
I justified that earlier. Yeah, I stated she was thrashing, but it most likely because of the blood pressure. And it's like putting gasoline on a person and lighting them on fire. I'm sure if you try to take their blood pressure, they're not going to cooperate with you at that time. I hate to use that analogy, but
You know, it's interesting. On the photographs we do have of Maya in the video, she doesn't seem to be that bad. Did you make a habit of videoing her or photographing her when she was curled up in bed on a bad day?
personally, I hated to. It tore me up. And just seeing some of the pictures today of her little legs and her trying to lift them up, I don't want to ever, I cannot wait till this is over with to get rid of all that.
One moment, Your Honor. On the amounts, finally, on the amounts involved in and the number of entries on those Aetna billing forms, are you worried so much about the fact that it's the percentage or amount, or the fact that Johns Hopkins was telling Aetna and apparently privately saying she had CRPS, while in public and in discharge notices saying that it was Munchausen by proxy?
Objection, leading, and the state's.
What, if anything, was your concern?
I sustain the objection.
What, if anything, was your concern about them putting CRPS in the bills, billing Aetna for CRPS, while things like that, discharge, were saying Munchausen by proxy?
Objection, leading, and argumentative again.
I ask what?
Overruled on that one.
My concern was they're billing for it, but they didn't treat Maya for it, which she definitely needed treatment for CRPS.
Mr. Shapiro, any further questions?
Very briefly, you're the only one.
Checks in the mail.
And Mr. Kowalski, just to be clear, when you met with Detective Graham, everything you told her was true, correct?
Like I said, she led me to answer some questions, but I did not lie.
That's my question to you. When you met with law enforcement, were you truthful with them?
I was truthful with her,
Thank you.
but I was led to certain things.
Well, sir, whether you were led there or not, were your answers to the detective truthful or not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Anderson, anything further?
Was the fact that somebody had called the sheriff's department to get her down there of concern to you?
Very concerning.
Did you believe at the time you were giving those answers, you were under duress and being threatened?
Objection. It's beyond the scope. It's also argumentative.
I stated that earlier. Yes, I was.
No further questions?
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Members of the jury, do any of you have any questions for Mr. Kowalski?
Sorry.
They wrote a novel.
And you have not seen any media coverage, is that correct? And just to let you know, when you walked out and I turned off the white noise machine, I asked Mr. Kowalski to step outside, so he did not hear me going over the questions with the jurors. So just wanted to let you know. And there's, I will tell you, 9 sheets of paper. 8 pages are full sheets. I got 1 page that's not a full sheet, so. Perhaps in the future we can just do a full sheet. Okay, Mr. Kowalski. Yes, sir. I'm just going to start reading questions. And I will say to the jury, I'm going to be able to ask most of them. There's a couple that I'm not going to be able to, but almost all of them I'm able to ask. Okay. Did you file a legal separation from your wife at the advice of legal counsel to get Maya home?
Glad you brought that up. Yes. It was advised by the child's attorney to get a legal separation. That way Maya could come home and be out of the hospital. But, I'm sorry, it wasn't the children's attorney. It was one of Beata's or mine. And the child's attorney advised not to, because the problem there, now mom wouldn't see Kyle. She wouldn't have no kids to see. But she agreed to move out of the house to have that happen. But it was the advice of the children's attorney not to do that, because now she would be without Kyle.
When you checked into the hospital, did the hospital registration explain your rights and responsibilities, or just ask you to sign the consent form?
It was more of signing. Maya was in severe pain. There was no, they didn't explain anything at that time.
Okay. And there's a question on that sheet that I'm not going to be able to ask that last question. Mr. Kowalski, this is in regards to the hospital, or the hospital wanted passwords of Maya's social media accounts. Was this requested verbally or in writing?
They called me.
Okay. Do you recall who requested a name, a known name?
I do have it. I believe it was Child Life that wanted it, and they stated that they wanted to set up a computer for Skype. But Maya had her own computer there already, so I didn't understand why they couldn't use that one. But they wanted Maya's passwords for all her social media and that. And my recommendation was to just go ahead and use a new password and just give it to us. That'd be a lot easier.
Well, I think you were anticipating the next question. Were passwords given to the hospital?
No.
Okay. Also, was Maya allowed to use social media while in the care of the hospital?
No, she was allowed to use a computer for school. This, I think Jackie Dietert mentioned that. It was the first time the school did something like that, Skype. And then it was probably a good thing for them, a good test, because not too much longer COVID was here and everybody was learning from home. But
Did the hospital keep Maya from communicating or posting via social media?
I do not believe she did any social media there at that time. That I honestly couldn't answer that one fully.
Okay. The same juror, the next page, I'm not going to be able to ask those questions. Maya was discharged with 3 to 4 diagnoses by Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, and none were CRPS. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Next question. When, if at all, was Maya ever examined and given a diagnosis of CRPS? The date and the doctor name, please.
That was Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick in Tampa, and that was after the Tampa General, so I would say, I'm guessing around August. I could be wrong on the date or the month.
Okay. The next series of questions. You are stating that the detective, after identifying herself and you agreeing to be interviewed, did not, 1, place a recording device in plain view, like on the table you were sitting at. I guess, is that correct?
That is correct. It was not in view.
Is it correct that she did not ask if she can record the interview?
That is correct. She did not.
Is it correct she did not start recording and first, on the record, identify herself, title, the date, time, location, and your name as being interviewed?
I didn't hear that. I don't believe so.
Thank you. Now we're going to the next juror's questions. I have to say, I appreciate y'all have much better handwriting than me, but my handwriting is horrible, so at least I'm able to read y'all's, so thank you. When you testified that Maya was not having withdrawal, how would pain reaction differ from withdrawal?
What I believe the question was with the withdrawal that was from the medication. She did have pain, though. She was always in pain, and like I said, it's not a constant level of pain. It could be high and it could be low. But when we were discussing withdrawal, that was in reference to ketamine. I never seen a withdrawal from ketamine.
What did you observe that helped you know the complaints were pain versus withdrawal?
Her complaints?
Yes, her being Maya's complaints.
The pain, you could see her guard, and then her facial expressions. A withdrawal, I would imagine more shaking, things like that, like a seizure, but you could see the pain, and I know her pain, so I knew the difference, and I never witnessed a withdrawal.
Next question. When Maya had her issues on July 4th, it seems that lack of motor function and pain reaction seems like a significant development. The records showed treatment took place a few days later. When did pain climax on July 4th?
She had pain, and they first believed it was from all the steroids she received. But then later in July, I believe, July 20th, that's when we really started seeing more signs with the pain.
Again, you contemplated the next question.
I'm good at it.
How long between episode to ER treatment?
I believe there's one before the 17th, but there was one in between, I believe. I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive. But we see more pain and more problems as it went on.
If there was a delay of more than a couple hours, why?
I don't understand that one.
Okay. I'm sure the lawyers can follow up. Maya's room, when it moved, did Maya get moved often? If so, how often?
Maya did get moved, and I read in my notes just recently, she asked that question, and the nurse stated after 30 days, you get moved to another room. I don't know if that's true or not, but I just read that today in my notes.
How many floors was she moved to during her stay?
I know she went from the first floor, and then the main most of the time was on the 7th floor. I could be wrong. There could be another floor involved. I honestly do not remember. But all the moves to rooms was basically on the one floor of, I believe it was 7th.
And did Miss Beatty follow her through the floors?
Yes, she did.
Next question, and for the juror, I'm not going to be able to ask that next question on your list, but the following one, in your experience as a fire expert, are parents usually a trustworthy source of information during an emergency or a hindrance to EMT assessment?
We utilize the people as much as possible. If they were, there's great resource, medical, and then also fire incidents. If you have somebody in a building trapped or whatever, they may tell you exactly where they're at and how to get in there. It'd save a lot of time. We don't have this where like a football team where you could take a timeout and figure everything out. You try to get information right away and act on it. They could be a problem too, where they're trying to tell you everything to do. And as a manager, all the fire officers went through a lot of management classes. They could be a great resource or they could be a problem. And if they're a problem, you should just kind of remove them from the area so you could do your job.
Did Beata supply dosage information to her blog?
That I don't know. I never really followed the blog.
Okay. How frequently was she updating it?
That I don't know.
Okay. So you wouldn't be able to know how specific?
No, sir.
Okay. Or a police source?
The what source?
It just says police source.
Police source?
Yeah.
I honestly don't understand that.
Had you met the officer who investigated the suicide prior to the suicide?
No.
Okay. Was the local, quote, force, end quote, aware of your career?
I'm sure they were. Yeah, they do ask you your occupation and everything. In the garage, I do have my old fire code in there, so I'm sure they've seen that. But I believe they do ask you what your occupation was.
Okay. Next question. You stated you did not want your daughter to take opioids. Did you request alternative medicine the first time the opioids were prescribed?
I don't know when the first opiates were prescribed, but we looked at the hyperbaric treatment, and that was without any medication. We thought that would be a good route to go. Unfortunately, it was out of pocket, but at that point, we didn't really care. We cared about Maya more than anything. And I meant to ask the doctor about if that helps the liver too, but I'll have to find that out someday.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask this, although I wasn't quite sure if, based on your answer, but if the previous answer was yes, what were the options and why did you decide against the alternative medicine?
Yeah, I wasn't the one doing most of the research, but I really don't have an answer for that one.
You stated most communication went through Beata.
That is correct.
Would you read through the medical notes throughout the duration of Maya's illness to ensure you received accurate information and to ensure that there was a clear understanding of communication between Beata and the medical staff?
I did not review them in full. She would let me know. She dummied it down for me. I do not know a lot of these terms or treatments, but I had 100% trust in her.
If your brother was not approved for visitation at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, how was he able to drive Maya to the Sarasota courthouse for Dr. Duncan's evaluation?
I'm from a family of 8. It was my other brother that drove Maya to the courthouse. It was not Bob. That was through the court.
During the time of the surveillance video at Johns Hopkins, do you know if medical orders were placed that required Maya to have assistance getting out of bed because of safety concerns?
I'm unaware of that.
Page 8. At any time has Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital staff, and I guess this is if you know, at any time has Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital staff been trained on CRPS, how to treat, and when did that training take place?
That I do not know.
And for this juror, I cannot ask the next question. The next question, Kathy Beatty, does Kathy Beatty work at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital or CPS or DCF? And is she still working there?
I believe she was an employee of the hospital and she's no longer working there.
And the last page, the page that isn't the full page. It's missing its friend. Okay. Was an assessment or investigation ever conducted on the family to either confirm or rule out the Munchausen allegation?
All family members, we had to go for a forensic psych evaluation. That was through Dr. Duncan. And I believe that's what they were trying to use that to rule it out. And I believe we heard Dr. Duncan with her findings.
And then the next question is, if so, by whom?
Dr. Duncan.
Okay. Members of the jury, that concludes the questions that were given to me. We're at 5:25. I see that we've got one more. Let me ask you this. I'm sure the plaintiffs and the defense are going to have follow-up questions. We're at 5:25.
I don't, Your Honor, if that helps for timekeeping, but it's up to you.
Okay. Do you want to finish this witness, which might be 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, or do you want to leave for the day? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I was just handed another question, but for the sake of time, I'm going to let Mr. Anderson ask his questions. Then we'll see if Mr. Shapiro has any questions, and then we'll go back to see if there's any further questions in addition to this question.
Jack, you were asked about whether the hospital had any training in CRPS. Were you told that they did not have a pain clinic, and that was why they wanted to transfer you to Nemours?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
At that time, I know they did not have a CRPS program. I know I could be wrong, but I believe it was Dr. Elliott saying that they're in the future gonna have one. But at that time, I believe there was not.
Was the excuse to transfer you that they did not have a pain clinic or CRPS program when you all came in?
Is it true?
Yes.
That is true. At that time, they did not, according to Dr. Elliott.
All right. And I'm trying to read the questions too. You were asked about, I think, I have a question for the court. We'll take it up in a moment. On the 4th of July, there was a question asked about how soon you got treatment after Maya had the event on the 4th of July. Did you take her to the ER immediately?
Yes, Beata took her to, I believe that one was Sarasota Memorial, and that's when they only had their main campus So it was in downtown Sarasota.
During the time you were there, how many rooms did she end up going through? And if you recall from
I'm going to guess 3 to 4.
when you were on the inspection, did you point out 5 or more?
Most likely.
And was it true that during the times that you visited her, you were less than 30 days between visits and she would be in different rooms?
Objection, again, leaving a lack of foundation.
Overruled. You can answer.
There's times I'm sure it was less than 30 days, yes. If you did the math, yes, it would be.
I think what the jury wants to know was that did that appear, that whole move every 30 days appear true to you or a excuse for moving her 4 or 5 different rooms?
Objection, foundation, argumentative.
Overruled. You can answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. I think what the jurors are interested in knowing is whether that moving her to a different floor every 30 days was, to you, did you take that as a true reason, or was that an excuse based on what you saw?
I don't think it was a true reason. I would believe it would be an inconvenience for them to move everything every 30 days.
So in your experience in visiting her, did you go to different rooms within a 30-day period?
Yes.
All right. And you'd been asked a question about them being trained in CRPS. I think we've already covered that. One more. Let me see. Through the time that Maya took, had the ketamine infusions, did you learn or see whether it affected her liver or not? Did her liver functions remain normal throughout all of that?
Yeah. This is, objection is beyond the scope of the questions presented.
No, it's
You can
about.
answer.
I know it affected it, but it would come down. I am not a doctor, and I think the best place to find that is maybe in their Dr. Hanna, Dr. Kirkpatrick, or Cantu's medical records. But I know it wasn't a big concern.
So was it actually during the infusion that they would have some variance and then afterward nothing?
I believe.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kowalski. Again, it's leading and it's lack of foundation based on the last answer.
Overruled.
Yeah, I believe it was a short term during, but I personally don't know exactly.
Fair enough. You were asked about the decision, not the decision, but the option of filing for legal separation. Was that because you no longer loved Beata, or was it a tactical decision to try to get Maya out of that hospital?
It was nothing about not loving my wife. It was about getting Maya out, and Beata was 100% compliant with that.
And throughout this entire period of time, despite all of the tension, did you continue to love your wife?
100%.
Are you finished, Mr. Anderson?
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Shapiro, did you
I
have?
don't have questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
So no questions?
No questions.
Members of the jury, do you all have any further questions? I know there's one, but is there any other questions from anyone? So can I have the attorneys up here for just this one? Mr. Kowalski, after being released from Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in January, I know the question says 2016, but I think it's 2017 is what the juror meant. So after being released from the hospital in January of 2017, has Maya ever been re-diagnosed with CRPS, or are those the 3 or 4 diagnoses from the hospital or the last?
I believe with Dr. Chopra, he stated once you have it, you always have it. She was never re-diagnosed. She did do a follow-up with Dr. Anthony Kirkpatrick with no treatments, but he did see improvement in her condition, but he sees that there is still CRPS.
Any follow-up?
Jack, the November 2020 admission,
Yes, that was at Arnold Palmer Hospital.
was there not a diagnosis on that?
Yes,
there?
I'm sorry, I completely forgot about that one. And that was, we were in the hospital for a week on that one.
Well, I'm here.
Defense.
No other questions, Your Honor.